So you want to play the very best sim racing games in the world, and you want to drive them at the highest frame rates with the best possible graphics quality. You want to fully experience what sim racing has to offer, but to do that, you need to have a sim racing PC. And this is where things get a little bit scary, because if you want to run the very latest sim racing games, they can be incredibly demanding, incredibly complicated, all sorts of settings, all sorts of hardware requirements, and there's just no good guide to a sim racing PC. So I went and built a sim racing PC by myself, and I'm going to let you know everything you need to know about getting into PC sim racing, all of the components to have an amazing experience. So let's get into it, and by the end of this video, you are going to be able to buy or build your dream sim racing PC. And by the way, I'm going to let you know some of the secrets of hardware, some of the equipment you don't need to buy, some of the equipment that is really important for sim racing. So on screen here, I've got Assetto Corsa EVO, which is the latest sim racing game in the world, running on a very highly spec'd gaming PC that I have. So I'm going to explain this later, but this is running on a 4090 graphics card with an Intel 3900K processor. Now, it doesn't mean anything right now. Don't worry about it. I'm going to let you know what it means. But these are the settings that I'm able to run with that specification. And that sort of PC is going to set you back more than $2,000 minimum. So when you compare that with a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X, you're talking, what, 5-6 times as much. So it's a very expensive setup. But the amazing thing about PC sim racing is you don't need to go that crazy to have a good experience. There's lots of optimization you can do. So I'm going to start with the graphics card. This is the most important thing when it comes to how your game is going to look. So for sim racing, that can mean resolution, which can impact whether you can use an ultra wide or triples or VR, and also frame rate. Can you go up way past 60 frames a second, past 120? Remember, the PlayStation 5 now will do 4K 120 in Gran Turismo 7, and with the PlayStation 5 Pro, it will do that pretty good graphics. But the PC can do more. Like I said, it can do ultra wide, it can do triples. Now, the graphics card I've used in this PC is a NVIDIA 4060 Ti. It's actually a graphics card that NVIDIA gave to me about a year ago that I haven't used before, so thanks to NVIDIA for that. It's an interesting card. I don't think it's the best card for a sim racing build. Like I said, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think for the performance you're looking for in sim racing, you either want to go substantially better than a 4060 Ti, or you want to do something cheaper. So for Assetto Corsa EVO, what you can see here, the minimum spec is a 1070 graphics card that would cost about $100, whereas a 4060 Ti costs about $350, $400. You can also get cards, by the way, from AMD or Intel. So check the minimum specs, and either I think if you're going to get a newer card, you're slightly better off future-proofing it, whereas if you want to get a cheaper card, you may as well get a second-hand card from a few years ago. Now moving on to the processor, this is the CPU. The CPU is probably the second most important thing in a computer when it comes to sim racing. A lot of the sim racing games are quite heavy on the CPU. Again, you have a couple of choices here. You have AMD or Intel. I went out and bought a AMD processor for this build. It's actually a 9900X. However, if you want to get a good CPU for sim racing, anything that's an X3D AMD chip is really rated for gaming and sim racing. I've built Intel PCs before. I've bought expensive Intel processors, and they do fine as well. But I'm just telling you, everyone seems to rate the X3D processors. So when it comes to CPU, the processor that I put in here cost me £400. So it's quite expensive. But again, you can look at the minimum and recommended specs of the sim racing games you want to play and maybe buy something a little bit older. I wouldn't recommend getting a second-hand CPU. When you put it in the PC, you have to apply some paste to it and stuff like that. It's not as simple as swapping out as a graphics card. Now, speaking of paste, this is all about cooling. So really don't forget the cooler in your PC, whether you're buying a pre-built or building it. There's a couple of reasons why this is particularly important for sim racing. The first thing is you're going to be wanting to get as maximum frames out of your PC as possible. So keeping everything cool is so important because essentially you're feeding in power to your components and you're going to be limited by how hot they are. So the cooler you can keep them, the more frames you're going to get. And you also might be keeping your PC on for long periods of time if you're doing endurance racing. Now, there's different ways you can cool a PC. There's liquid cooling, or there's basically air cooling. Here you can see there's a liquid cooler. By the way, Corsair heard I was doing this video and they gave me some fans and coolers and things like that. So anything you see in this video that's got a Corsair logo on it, they gave it for this video. Big thanks to Corsair. And one of them is this cooler. You can see me screwing on here, comprises of a radiator and a liquid cooler, but you can also get a fan cooler as well. I would recommend getting a liquid cooler if you're going to have a high performance PC. Another aspect that's important for sim racing is memory, not to be confused with hard drives or storage. This is memory, and it's really important in sim racing because we're seeing more memory being required to run the latest games. So for this build, I've got 64 gigabytes of memory, again provided by Corsair. Big thanks to Corsair. I wouldn't go lower than 32 gigabytes for sim racing PC really. I think that's going to be relatively future-proofed. I think 64 is maybe overkill. I've seen some people do 128, which is absolutely mad. So think about your memory. I think memory is one of the cheaper things to buy these days. You can get all this different speeds, look at the megahertz of the RAM, but just think about trying to get at least 32 gigabytes. It's very easy to install and swap as well, by the way. It just really clicks in. It's one of my favorite things about building a PC is putting in the memory. So I would concentrate on getting more memory rather than trying to get a slightly faster memory. But let me know in the comments if you disagree. By the way, if this video has helped you so far, make sure you subscribe because I want to do lots more videos like this and I want you to see them basically if it's going to help you out. So memory is important, not to be confused with storage. So I'm going to let you know about storage. When it comes to PCs, there's a big generational difference in how you're going to have your storage. You can have traditional hard drives, they're the noisy things that kind of rattle, or you can have SSD drives that are kind of like that, a bit smaller, or you can have NVMe solid state drives as well, and that means there's no moving parts. That's what I've got in my hand here, and it just literally clips into the motherboard. So we'll talk about the motherboard in a bit as well, but if you want to be playing the latest sim racing games and not worrying about file sizes, not worrying about downloading mods or more cars, I would say really go for a lot of storage. I've gone for a 4 terabyte storage in this PC here, and I've got some extra slots as well that are going to be super easy when there's a deal on for me to buy more hard drives and slot them in as well. So 4 terabytes is pretty huge. You can see me putting it in there. So I bought a Predator hard drive here for my Asus motherboard, and I think I've got 3 or 4 more slots as well. I really would not recommend buying a mechanical hard drive unless you're really limited on costs. You'll really enjoy getting a fast NVMe hard drive, which is just going to be absolutely blazing quick, and it's something that's a newer generation in PC building that I like to take advantage of. Now let me tell you about the motherboard, which is the whole thing you see there. It's the ROG. So I went out and bought a ROG Strix 8X70E. They always have incredible naming conventions that are definitely not very boring. And the motherboard is something that if you build your PC, you can have more control over. If you buy a pre-built PC, often the motherboard isn't as important. Now, as a sim racer, I think the motherboard is important because you can have lots of ports, or you can choose to have more ports. And if you think about your wheels going to go in, your pedals might go in separately. You might have other peripherals going in separately, like dashes. And suddenly you're going to be using a lot of USB ports. And perhaps on a pre-built PC, it might not come with that many, and you have to use a dongle or a hub. And I can tell you from experience, a lot of wheels and pedals don't play nice with hubs. So I went out and bought this motherboard, which was quite expensive. I think it was about £500, but it has an absolute ton of USB ports. So I'm not going to be limited. I can plug things in directly, and I'm not going to have any glitches. Now, there are other things as well to bear in mind when building a PC that can be very, very, very fiddly, like doing the fans, doing your cable management, attaching everything in. And if that all sounds really scary, you can look at getting a pre-built. There's nothing wrong with getting a pre-built. I bought an Alienware pre-built, and a lot of PC nerds will tell you, don't get an Alienware, but I've absolutely loved it. Now, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do another video, a long video, going through the build. So if you want to see that, put a spanner emoji in the comments, and I'll make sure to pin a comment here when that's up. But let me know what you thought about this, helping you get going with a sim racing PC. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.